Hello everyone and welcome to the Project Virtual Conference 2015 and specifically to this session, Leveraging Nintex for Project Management Nirvana. My name is Alex Burton. In my day job I am the Director of Product Management at Nintex, responsible for SharePoint and 365 products. And in my spare time I'm an MVP for Microsoft Project and have been for the past 6 years. What I wanted to do today is to spend some time to show you how the Nintex products can assist your organization with project management process and specifically achieving Nirvana. But before we get started, I want to take a few moments to thank our sponsors who, without their support today, the Project Virtual Conference would not be possible. Now before we get started, I'm just going to spend a few moments to tell you a little bit about Nintex. We are the global standard in enterprise workflow automation across SharePoint, Office 365 and Project Server. We have over 6,000 customers who use and love our products. We have over 1,100 partners out there who help in implementing solutions using our product stack to meet customers' business needs. Our products are sold and are available in over 90 countries, and we've been recognized many times as the best add-on for SharePoint 365 and Project Server, most recently with the 2015 Office and SharePoint Development Application Partner of the Year Award at the Microsoft Partner Awards. So today I'm going to take you through some real-world demos of our Nintex products and how they can help with your PM process. Specifically, we are going to be looking at 3 environments commonly deployed in the enterprise. First, we're going to look at Project, and specifically Project Server, the powerful PPM solution that allows you to manage individual projects and resources, tasks and timesheeting, portfolio prioritization and optimization, and of course, project collaboration. Then we're going to spend a bit of time looking at SharePoint, the premier environment for collaboration within the enterprise. In SharePoint 2013, Microsoft introduced a number of enhancements making the project management a first-class workload. Things like the new timeline, simple statusing, and of course that great sync to project feature that we all know and love. And finally, we're going to look at Office 365, the rapidly changing cloud-based service that for a low per user per month cost will provide you with hosted SharePoint, Exchange, Skype, and Project Online, bringing new capabilities every few months and ensuring that you get the best and the newest features as you require them. So let's spend a bit of time and look at each of these platforms in a little bit more detail. To start with, we're going to look at Project Server. Now when you think of process automation in the Project Server context, the first thing that really springs to mind is demand management. Now I'm not going to spend a heap of time going through the details of what demand management is inside Project Server, but to set the scene, in case you've not come across it, it allows you to implement an organizational process across the whole life cycle of a project, using some of the constructs that Project Server provides, like custom fields, the great project detail pages that you can build to capture the data you wish, stages, all of these wired together by a workflow process. So the important thing to grasp with demand management is, unlike the name suggests, it's there for the whole project lifecycle, not just organizational demand for resources across project requests. With this in mind, you can of course leverage these capabilities to build out your whole organizational process across all aspects of project delivery. Some of these options can include approval processes, making sure you have the correct approvals in place from within the organization before you move through a stage gate. Having the ability to audit who is approved and when is an incredibly important option in a number of organizations. Being able to add notifications into your process, allowing key project team members, stakeholders, or other parties within your organization to be notified as certain events happen in your projects or when stages are completed or entered. And finally, things like integration, being able to take your demand management process and integrating that with an external financial system to push actuals, being able to pull resource rates in from an external system when you're resourcing the project, or potentially provisioning external accounts or records in bespoke systems at any point in the life cycle. All of these are incredibly important enhancements that you may wish to bring into your demand management workflow. So what I'm going to do today is to show you how quickly and easily you can build out a demand management workflow using Nintex Workflow for Project Server. So here I have a Project Server instance. What I'm going to do today is show you how simple and quick it can be to build out a demand management workflow and then take you through an example of executing one so you can see the capabilities that Nintex Workflow for Project Server can provide. Now to start with, I'm going to open up my Workflow Designer, and to do that I just go to the top right hand corner and I choose Nintex Workflow for Project Server from the drop down list. In this case I'm going to choose Create a Demand Management Workflow. As you can see, it's opened up a browser-based workflow designer here, so I can come in and, using a simple drag and drop interface, build out my workflow process. There's no need for me to install powerful desktop software to each of my users to be able to do this. I can put this through the browser and control it centrally out to my users. Now you see here the designer's given me an option to select a workflow template. I'm just going to choose blank and click on Create. And here I have the design canvas. So what I'm going to do is just going to stretch this out a bit and we'll go through the three areas of the canvas. Across the top we have the control bar, and that's where I can create new, I can publish, I can save, or I can change some other settings of the workflow. On the left hand side I have my workflow actions, and that's where I can go through and choose the different components that I want to use to build my workflow. And in the center I have the canvas where I'm going to build my workflow process out. Okay, to build a workflow, it's as simple as picking the action I'm interested in, clicking it and dragging it onto the canvas. You'll see here it's very simple. Drag and drop straight onto the canvas and I can start to build my process. Now let's take a few moments to look at the action I just dragged on. This was a set project stage. As you'd be aware, inside a project server demand management workflow there's a concept of stages. And it's no different inside an Nintex workflow. I'm just going to double click on the action and I'm going to bring up the configuration screen, and you'll see here it's very simple. I have a drop down list and it has all of my stages that have been configured inside Project Server available for me to choose. So in this particular case I'm just going to choose initial proposal details. Now if I'm not quite prepared and I haven't set those stages up ahead of time, I can also go in and click on Create Project Stage, and it will go off and create that take me to the page so I can create those. But in this case here, that's sufficient. I'm just going to click on Save, and you'll see there that the exclamation mark has disappeared and that the action is now configured and ready to use. So before I drag any more actions on, let's just spend a few moments and look at the components that are available for you to use in your workflow designs. Starting with Project Server, you'll see here we have actions that enable you to set the project stage, read project properties, so that's allowing you to read any things that are in the custom fields. I have actions here that let me update project properties, that let me read project security groups depending on which security mode I have my Project Server instance, and things like being able to publish a project directly from Workflow, which can be quite powerful. However, you'll also notice we have a few extra things in there. We have actions that allow you to wait for check-in, wait for a portfolio commit, or wait for a submit, so that you can tie your workflows onto them just like you can with SharePoint Designer. Plus we have some other additional actions, the ability to be able to change the project EPT, or using the powerful Query Project Server action, I have the ability to go in and talk to Project Server directly through the PSI and pull data back that I can leverage inside my workflow process. Now, being based on Nintex Workflow 2013, Workflow for Project Server has access to all the capabilities of Nintex Workflow 2013. So if we spend a moment and have a look here, you'll see that you have actions that enable you to call web services, to integrate with SQL, to be able to query and manipulate XML, as well as talk to things like CRM. Being based on SharePoint, we have a rich pedigree of actions around SharePoint, being able to create items, to copy items, to create lists, to be able to update items, etc., etc. Obviously, with the process automation tool, having those rich logic and flow actions is incredibly important. So we have actions that enable you to do looping, to be able to run parallel actions, to be able to switch, to be able to run if certain conditions are met. And of course, one of the great powerful features of Nintex workflow, the ability to create state machine actions. If we look in operations, you'll see here we also have a number of actions that can assist you with creating starting workflows, pausing, logging, building strings, and data math manipulation. Not necessarily related to Project Server, but also may be of use within a SharePoint environment. We have some very rich provisioning actions. These enable you to be able to create users in Active Directory, to be able to create site collections, to be able to create audiences, and really assist in those provisioning onboarding scenarios that you may have inside SharePoint or Project Server. And finally, let's have a bit of a look at user interaction. The ability to be able to create tasks, assign tasks to people. You'll see here we have actions that enable you to talk to Exchange, so you can create appointments or look at meeting suggestions. Something that can be incredibly powerful in a project management scenario, where perhaps you're doing a project kickoff meeting and you want to automate that process. We have customers that have gone off and used those actions and actually go out and reach into people's calendars, see when they're available, and then use workflow automation to create the kickoff meeting automatically. Something that's truly mind-bending to see in practice. However, today we're not going to spend too much time going through these different actions. What I'm going to do is just spend a few moments and open a workflow that I created earlier, one of our project governance workflows. So I'm just going to choose that. As you'll see here, Nintex Workflow also provides you with a full version history of workflows, so I can have multiple workflow designs in different stages. So I can go back and pick an older version and see if it's changed, or perhaps I want to work on a new version without publishing it out to anybody. So let me just open this workflow design up. There you go. I have a very simple workflow that I'm just going to take you through. To start with, we're going to set the project stage of our new project to initial proposal details. We're then going to traverse this workflow. I'm going to read in some of the properties of the workflow, and I've used two read project property actions. So in this case here, if I just double click on this action, we'll bring up the configuration box and you'll be able to see what I've done. In this case, I'm picking the project property, project sponsor, and if I click on this drop down, you'll be able to see that I have all of these project properties, or custom fields as they're known, available to me to pull in. Okay, so in this case here I've got my project sponsor, and I'm going to store that result in a variable, okay, a temporary variable where I'm going to store that called project sponsor name. Now I have another one on this side that's doing a similar thing and pulling the proposal name in, and then once I've got that information, I've come down and I've created a flexi task. Okay, I'm going to open this up because the flexi task is a very powerful feature of Nintex Workflow and Nintex Workflow for Project Server. So inside the flexi task, I can choose a number of things. I can choose who I want to assign the task to, and if I wish to assign it to a group of people, I can do that too. I have some options to say whether or not this task can be delegated. So for instance, if I assign this task to a person and that person went on leave for a number of weeks, they could set their delegation, so say that they were away and they wished any tasks that came to them to be sent to somebody else. Now as the workflow author, I have the power to say whether or not I wish that to occur. We have another option called lazy approval, and when we get to the demo I'm going to show you lazy approval in action. Very powerful feature and something very unique to Nintex. As I move down, you'll see here I have the options for different outcomes. In this case I have approve and reject, and you'll see that I have my approve and reject branches available in the designer. However, if I wish to add other outcomes, it's very simple. I click on add outcome and I can type the name in. Okay, there's no need to go off and change site content types or anything like that outside of the workflow. I can do that directly from within the workflow configuration. You'll see I have some options around behavior, so it's not just who approves it, but I have options to say the first response applies, majority decides, all must agree on a specific outcome. So you can see that can be quite powerful. And finally, if we scroll down, you'll see here that I've got given this a task name, and you may notice that this is in red. Now what that means is this is a variable. This is something that when I run, that project proposal name is going to be substituted with the value that I read in my variable above. Okay, so I'm just going to close this, and then we'll look through the rest of the process. So basically, if my my task is approved by the sponsor, it's going to go down this right-hand branch. And if we look at this right-hand branch, what happens is I'm going to read in the project property for estimated project budget, which is a custom field. And then I'm going to push that estimated project budget into the approved budget. So I'm going to basically take the estimated and I'm going to crystallize it as approved, because that's what my sponsor has approved. I'm then going to publish the project so that that information gets updated. And I'm going to set the project stage to be execution. I'm going to move my project along to the next stage. Pretty simple. However, if my sponsor does not approve the task and he rejects it, it's going to go to the rejected side of my task, and it's going to change the state to rejected. I'm going to put a little bit of information in that why it was rejected, and then I'm going to terminate the workflow. Okay, so very simple workflow process. Before I can use this process, I need to publish it. So what I would do is I'd come up here and I'd click on the publish button. We take the Nintex workflow that you've built and we compile it into a declarative workflow that's then published into Project Server. And the same applies for SharePoint. We leverage SharePoint's workflow engine. There is no need to have a third-party workflow engine set up. Our stuff runs inside SharePoint, so you get all the benefits of the power of SharePoint and the capacity and the sizing that you've put into your SharePoint farm. So let's have a quick look at where this workflow would have gone when I published it. So if I go into my server settings, and I'm just going to pop into my enterprise project types, and you'll see that I have an enterprise project and I have a governance project, and you'll see here that this has got the governance workflow associated with it. So just to prove that there's no smoke and mirrors here, there's the governance workflow that I created. It's been assigned, and that's what we're going to leverage inside Project Server today. So let me flip back to projects and let's kick one off. Let's see what happens here. So I'm just going to come in and I'm going to click on the projects toolbar, going to click on new, and I'm going to say governance project. So I'm going to click on that. What's going to happen is Project Server is going to spin up and it's going to throw up the first PDP or project detail page. So I'm going to put in here a name and I'm going to call this the Project Virtual Conference 2015. Whoops, getting ahead of myself, 2015. I've got the start date. It's picked up who I am, Eden Stafford. Okay, so I'm logged on as Eden Stafford. And it's going to let me choose the project sponsor. And this is the person who the approval is going to go to that we saw in that design. So I'm going to pick Brett Campbell. And I'm going to put in my estimated proposal cost. And I'm going to say that this particular project is going to cost us $50,000. Okay, so I'm going to click on Save. And what's going to happen is that information I've put in is going to go into Project Server, and Project Server is going to spin up a demand management workflow using that design you saw before. It'll take a few moments to occur, but in a moment we'll see, we'll switch, there you go, to the workflow status page. We've actually kicked the workflow status off. Now there's some important things to highlight here. The first one is, as I said, we use SharePoint's workflow engine. So you see all the stages in our workflow have been picked up seamlessly by Project Server. And then if we look in the all project stages here, you can see, whoops, you can see all that information again. Okay. So what I'm going to do, we're just going to click up here and you'll notice there's a new button that says Workflow Progress. Now that's not normally there. That's something that Nintex provides. So if I click on that, I'm going to open up a Workflow Progress page that's going to show you where we are in the process. And you can see we have this view of the workflow, and it's telling me I'm on the first page. I'm on the first action because it's yellow. So if I go back to my main page here, I'm just going to click on Submit, and that's going to move me on in the workflow process. It'll take a few moments, and if I go back to my workflow here and I refresh this page, you'll see that we've moved on. There you go. So all the items in this visualization that are green are completed. And if I hover over them, I can see the time I entered and the time I exited. Okay, and it's very simple for a user to come in and see where I am. However, it's telling me that I'm now on the flexi task. I'm now waiting for Brett to approve. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go back and I'm going to close the project and check it in. Okay, and then I'm going to go back and I'm going to have a look at Brett's inbox, and I just happen today to have access to Brett's inbox. And if I look up the top here, I have an email that's come from the administrator, and it's telling me that a project proposal for Project Virtual Conference 2015 has been raised and requires approval. And you'll see in here I have some other information. I have a link to the project if I wish, and I could respond to the task and get some other information if I wanted to. But in this particular case, it also says lazy approval has been enabled. So what I'm going to do is reply to the email and just say the word approved. Okay, it's that simple. Now what lazy approval lets me do is it lets me use email as a response to a task. Those email responses come from a dictionary, and that dictionary has predefined responses, those including things like approved, declined, yes, no, okay, and you have the option to update that to whatever you require. Now this is pretty important when you're in a project server environment. When you have these kind of processes that are out there and you need to get hold of senior stakeholders who may want to be able to approve or reject certain things, leveraging lazy approval is really important because you can get them wherever they are. If they're out on the golf course, if they're in meetings, you know, if they're on traveling around the world, they might not have time to get into SharePoint or Project Server to be able to respond. So being able to get them on their mobile device or their iPads is very important. So let's see what's happened. I'm just going to refresh this. We should see that that response has now made its way back into SharePoint. It might take a few moments. When it does, it's going to remember it's coming through the internet, it's coming through email. What will happen is Nintex will pick up that response, we'll interpret it, and we'll either approve or reject based on what that response was. Now you might be asking, well, what happens from an audit perspective? Well, the important thing here is that we take the audit, the email that's sent back, and we stamp it into the audit trail of the workflow, as you can see here. So we have that workflow history. This is the textual view of that visualization. But you'll see in the past few moments that that email response has come back in with the approved statement that I said, and we've stamped that directly into the audit trail. So let's go back, see where we are. There you go. So we've been approved. You've got the approval notice on there from Brett. And then we've gone off down the approved path. So we're now in, we've read that budget, we've updated it, we've published, and we're now sitting in execution. Okay, so you saw how simple that was. Very simple workflow. Basically changed the state, the stage of the project several times, read some information in, and sent a task off to a key stakeholder and gave them the opportunity to be able to respond directly from their email. Okay, all in a matter of seconds. So now I want to take a few moments to look at other ways that you can leverage Nintex to extend and integrate Project Server. We've seen how Project Server's demand management capability can be used to implement your process directly into Project Server, but perhaps you have a number of scenarios where you want to do things at a different frequency or not specifically linked to the project management process. So what I want to talk you through is a thing that we call event-driven workflows. And these can assist in many, many different scenarios. Perhaps you wish to integrate with an external system. Maybe you want to send data out to an external system when a project is saved or published. Maybe you want to push timesheet data out to an external billing solution when a timesheet is submitted. Perhaps you want to make sure every time a project is published that you pull in the most up-to-date resource cost rates. All very real-world examples that people run into again and again in the field. Maybe you want to kick off processes within Project Server. like triggering a project to be archived every time it's published, or snapshotting custom field values every time they change, or perhaps even automatically deploying workflows to workspaces when they provision. Project Server also provides some excellent notification capabilities, but they can be quite limited in what they notify, as well as the format in which they can be sent. So perhaps you want to be able to add things like corporate branding to your notifications. Perhaps you want to be able to notify a resource manager each time a new resource has been assigned to them. Again, all very real-world scenarios that event-driven workflows can help with. So, what I want to do now is take you through what we call an event-driven workflow. It basically enables you to bind a Nintex workflow to over 115 server-side post events. Now by events I mean when an event has occurred in projects. So for instance that will be when a project is published, a resource is added, a timesheet is submitted. So let's have a brief look at event-driven workflows inside Nintex workflow for Project Server. To access them, I'm going to click on the cog, choose Nintex workflow for Project Server, and then manage event-driven workflows. This takes me into a screen where I can associate a workflow process with a Project Server server-side event. So I'm going to choose this one at the top and click on Edit. And we can see here that we have the same browser-based designer that Nintex workflow for Project Server uses for demand management workflows, but also for normal SharePoint workflows. Now, unlike demand management workflows, we don't have access to the same actions for Project Server. We have a subset because not all of those actions that you saw before are relevant outside of a demand management workflow. In this case here we have three distinct actions that we can leverage. The retrieve event data action, which we'll look at in a moment, the query Project Server action that enables me to go in and talk to Project Server's PSI to get information out, and also the update project properties action. Now both Query Project Server and Update Project Properties are available for you to use inside your normal SharePoint workflows as well, if you've installed Nintex Workflow for Project Server. Now let's have a quick look at this workflow design. I'm going to open up the Retrieve Event Data action, and you can see here that I've configured this to listen for when the project is published. However, I don't have to just pick that. If my process or my requirement is to listen for a different event, I can choose so. So in the case of project, I have many other options that are available to me. However, I may wish to use other events completely, i.e. different capabilities of Project Server, in which case I could use a timesheet event. So let's have a quick look at timesheets. And you'll see here I have timesheet created, deleted, recalled, reviewed. Imagine what auditing processes I could put in there if I wanted to. Let's just close this one down. Now this particular workflow process is pretty simple. Basically, when an event fires and the project is published, we listen for the event and then we move through and we check to see if the approved project budget is not zero, i.e. has it been set up yet, have we got that far in the process. If we haven't, well, we'll skip through and we'll terminate. But if we have, we'll go in and we'll use the Query Project Server action to interrogate the project schedule data directly through the PSI. In this particular case here, I'm going in, talking to project and calling the read project method. And again, Nintex Workflow for Project Server gives you access to many different methods. Now with read project, I'm going to call it for the ID I'm interested in, and in this case here I'm going to talk to the published database. But if I wanted to, I could go in to the draft database, the version database, or the archive database. Now as this is effectively calling the PSI, I also have access to all the information that PSI would provide back. Things like project information, task information, resources, assignments, custom fields, etc, etc. Now here I'm just looking at the task and I'm going to pull back the task where the task ID equals to 0. Again, I have the full power of the API here. So as we scroll through this, you'll see that I can get and leverage any of these fields or data items that the API makes available to me, I can use inside my workflow process. Now this particular example, I'm not going to run it today, I'm just going to walk you through it. Once I've got back my summary task cost, I look up the project properties, I pop them in a history list just for logging, and basically I'll do a check. If the project cost is greater than the approved budget, I'll do nothing. If the project cost is greater than the approved budget, I will do something. I will send a notification to the sponsor. However, if the project cost is less than the approved budget, I'll do nothing. Now you can start to understand why this could be so powerful. In this particular workflow case, I now have that capability that every time a project is published, I can check the data that's inside the project schedule, in this case the cost, and if that is greater than the approved budget, I'm going to send a notification off to my sponsor. And in this case here, I've just gone through and customized this to say, hi project sponsor name, so it'll substitute the name in there. This email is to advise that the approved budget for the project has been exceeded. So I have that instantaneous notification that my project budget has been exceeded. Now if you start to think of the other applications of these event-driven workflows, I can have notifications or other integration processes occurring whenever an event occurs inside Project Server, and that provides a wealth of extension and augmentation opportunities for a customer or a partner. So I'm just going to close this design. As I say, I'm not going to run it today. I just want to show you one last thing, and that's around the association. So again, before I can use this, all I need to do is go in, I take my workflow design, okay, which is this one here, and I've associated against project published. When I've saved that, it'll take a few moments. Nintex workflow for Project Server will go through behind the scenes and associate this particular workflow with that event, and you're ready to use it. Now the event-driven workflows use the server-side event handler infrastructure inside Project Server. So there may be a small increase in time as you're processing through the queue as that event fires and that workflow kicks off. But ultimately you will get that integration in that place, and that's awesome. So now I want to move on to look at the second area, SharePoint Server, the on-premises collaboration tool. Well, in fact, I'm also going to spend a bit of time here and look at Office 365, because these are both so close today in terms of capability, not only between SharePoint and 365, but also in the Nintex tools available, that I want to have a look at them together. So let's just spend a few moments to run through some of those key scenarios in SharePoint and 365 where Nintex can assist. I should call out, these are not exhaustive. This is just a sample of some of the more interesting and common scenarios. To start with, let's have a look at document approvals. The ability to route documents to reviewers and approvers, including complex routing logic, to ensure all parties are across that specification or statement of work that needs to be approved. Of course, once a document has gone through this process, you can leverage external services such as DocuSign to provide e-signatures for audit and compliance purposes. Second area, change management. Like document approvals, SharePoint and 365 can be used to create change management registers to accurately reflect change requests and then route those requests to the correct party for review and authorization. That ability to be able to put a financial change request through and send it to the stakeholder, and the stakeholder can sign that off before it goes to the sponsor, to the finance department, can be incredibly powerful. External sharing is another key scenario that should be considered. There are many situations where it's necessary to share information externally with other parties that may be outside your organization. Through the use of process automation with things like Nintex Workflow, you can set up processes to send and track assets being sent externally, and then the ability to identify who's received those assets, that they've acknowledged they've got them in a transmittal-like scenario, and then having a two-way synchronization to be able to bring those assets back in to your SharePoint or 365 environment. A big and very, very common scenario is risk and issue management. The ability to be able to manage your risk and issued registers directly from within SharePoint or 365, allowing anybody in your organization to record a risk or issue, but then putting a process behind it so that it can be routed to the relevant party for review or updates before it's admitted onto the official registers. And another key thing, being able to ensure that anybody can register a risk or issue from wherever they may be in your project. And we're going to see a little bit more about that in a moment. And finally, another area that I want to talk about briefly is status reporting. The ability to be able to automate a status reporting process to remove that manual pain around following up team members or project members to get those updates. Through a simple process, requests for updates can be managed, and you can leverage process automation to send out notifications to let team members or project managers know that they need to provide a status update, to use escalation if you do not get an update within a certain time, and then pull that information back into a centralized register that you can then use a workflow automation process to create a document. So what I want to do now is I'm going to take a bit of a look at our final demo today, which is around risk management in SharePoint, and specifically what I'm going to look at is Office 365. So I'm just going to switch to my demo environment. So what I have here is a simple project site that I've created inside Office 365. And in this particular case, I've removed some of the out-of-the-box stuff and just popped a risk register on the front page. So let's just have a quick look at the risk register. It looks very familiar. If you've created these yourself in the past, we have a title field, a description of the risk, some choice fields for category, likelihood and impact, and then a couple of multiple line of text fields for contingency and mitigation. Now of course you can extend and enhance this list as much as you wish, but for today I'm just going to stick with these particular items. So what I wanted to achieve today is really trying to make it as easy as possible for anybody to be able to provide a risk into this register. Perhaps I have a building project and I have people out in the field and they wish to be able to provide risks or issues around health and safety back into a central register. Or perhaps I'm using I have a geographically distributed team. And those team members, they need to be able to provide those risks back into a central view from wherever they are in the world, not necessarily being connected to SharePoint or Project Server. So today what we're going to show you is how Nintex Forms can assist, and specifically I'm going to look at Nintex Forms for Office 365. So I'm just going to go up here and click on Nintex Forms, and that's going to invoke the Nintex Forms designer for me. And we will then take that very simple list that I'd set up and those columns and create a pixel perfect form that we can pop over the top of that. So the design is loading up here, takes a few moments. Okay, as you'll see here, we've taken all of those columns that were in that particular list and we've generated a form automatically. Now I can go in and I can change the look and feel of this form to my heart's content. So I could go in and I could change the risk description and make it bold. I can change the fonts if I wanted to, and I can move controls about as I see fit. You'll also notice, very similar to Nintex Workflow, that on the left hand side I have a number of different form controls that I can also drag on and leverage in my form if I wish. Now Nintex Forms is a very, very powerful product and can provide UIs across your business process. Now we've wanted to make this as easy and as flexible as possible, so we've also added capabilities around rules. So you can pick fields and using our rule designer go in and create rules that enable you to change the formatting of a control based on other information or the appearance of a control. So perhaps if my category is financial, I can change the impact field or hide it completely. Okay, all possible with the rules engine of Nintex Forms. Now for today, I'm not going to do anything drastic. I'm just going to press the undo button to take that back, and I'll get rid of the bold as well. But what I want to do is I want to use this form elsewhere. I want this form to be available to me on a mobile device. Perhaps my risk register is something that I want everybody in my organization to have access to. Perhaps I'm running a project where I have team members that are out in the field, and I want to make sure that those team members can access the risk register from wherever they are on their mobile device. And this is where Nintex Forms comes into its own. What I'm going to do is I'm going to choose a different layout. And what that enables me to do is to target this form at different devices. So I'm going to click here, and if I click on add more layouts, you can see I can choose many different options: iPads, Windows tablet, Android tablet, all items that would enable me to fill in that form directly from a browser based form filling experience using the native browser of my mobile device. But today I want to show you something pretty cool and exciting. I want to show you something that we call Nintex Mobile. What I'm going to do is I'm going to choose Nintex Mobile from my layout, and you'll see here that it's taken that form and it's compressed it into a view that's more relevant for a mobile device. Stripped out some of the graphics, but I can put those back if I wish, and it's expanded it so that it's available on a mobile device. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to publish my form. It will then get pushed out back up to Office 365, and it'll get made available to me. Now you might be wondering, how do I access this on my phone? Well, Nintex has a set of mobile clients called Nintex Mobile. Those clients are available for iOS, for Android, for Windows Phone, and for Windows Tablet. Okay. Now through these clients we have the ability to be able to render these forms and fill them in. Now why is that important? Well, through the mobile clients you have the ability to fill these forms in when you're either connected to the internet, or more importantly, disconnected from the internet, so you don't have to be online all the time. So if you find yourself in a situation where you think of a risk, you want to record that risk, you can go in and you can type that in, and next time your phone comes into mobile range or connects to a network, it'll synchronize that seamlessly back with Office 365 or SharePoint. Now, being a native app on a mobile device, we also have the ability to leverage other capabilities of the device. Things like geolocation. I can get a view of wherever I am. I can use the GPS capabilities of my phone and push that into the form. I can leverage things like barcode scanning if I wish, or even more impressive, image annotation, so I can take a photo of that risk, annotate it, save it against my form, and push it back into Office 365 or SharePoint. Now today what I want to show you is something that takes those mobile apps as they were and takes them to the next level. And that's through a service that we call Nintex Mobile Enterprise. Through NME we have the ability to create dedicated applications where you can brand and customize them as you see fit, and then deploy them through your internal MDM or MAM systems out to your devices. And what I've done here is I've created one for the Project Virtual Conference, and I've entitled it the Project Virtual Conference Risk Recorder. What I did was went through a very simple process inside NME and provided 4 images, just 4 images, which I uploaded. I put some information in about my Office 365 tenant that I wanted to talk to, and then I went in and I chose what platforms I wanted to build for. In this case I have Windows Phone, but I could have chose Windows, iPhone and iPad and Android. I then went in and I used a capability that we called form filters, and that enables me to ensure that only the forms that are relevant for this app are visible. Finally, I put my images in, and I can upload 4 images, and I've put some of the conference images in here. So I've got one here, and I've called it the Project Virtual Conference Risk Recorder. I put this other 3 images in, and what happens is that Nintex Mobile Enterprise takes those images and converts them into the relevant sizes for each of the apps. Okay. Now finally, all that's required is for me to click on the Queue to Build button, and Nintex Mobile Enterprise will go off. It will build out those apps for me behind the scenes, and then it'll send me an email to let me know that it's ready to be deployed. So let's see this in action. What I have here is a Windows phone. Oops, let's get rid of that. And on this Windows phone I have two apps. I have the normal Nintex mobile app, and I have my Project Conference 15 Risk Recorder. Now this is a fully functional app that I've built. You see here I can change the size and the different icons get seen. But I'm going to click on that and I'm going to open it up, and it's going to jump me into a form straight away. So this is my risk register, but it's available on my mobile device. So I'm just going to put a title in, and I'm going to say risk that phone will update during demo. There you go. And what should we say for a description? Windows update likely to break phone. There you go. Whoops, break phone. There you go. And I can choose the category if I wish. I've got those options, and these are the options I'd have if I was using this on the web form as well. I'm going to choose other. Likelihood, I'm going to say very low, and I'm going to select the impact, and we'll say the impact will be very high. Okay. Now this information is all cached. It's all available offline, so I don't have to be connected to the internet. It just happens to be in the phone. I'm not going to put contingency. I'm not going to put a mitigation in there. And if I wanted to, I can add an attachment. That attachment could either be a photograph or a video. Okay, I'm not going to do that today. Now, if I wasn't connected, or if I wasn't quite ready to push this risk up into Office 365, I could click on the save icon and I'd be fine. But I'm ready, so I'm going to click on the submit button. There you go. That's it. It's submitted that information off to Office 365 now. So if I flick back to my demo environment and I go back to come out of Forms. Oh, there you go. It's there already. Risk that my phone will update during demo. You see how quick that was? It took a matter of seconds for the information on my mobile device to be sent up to my risk register. So imagine how powerful that could be for customers and for your organization, where you want to be able to have those customized risk recording apps or other apps and synchronize them instantly back to Office 365 wherever you are in the world. So what you've seen today is a sample of how the Nintex workflow platform can be used within a number of typical project management scenarios. These range from the very simple through to the more complex, but you would have to agree that the products we've seen make the implementation and use of these processes very quick and simple. Gone is the need for developers or bespoke solutions. Gone is the need to deploy complex desktop applications for building workflows or forms. Through the Nintex products, we have a very simple to use drag and drop browser-based designer, a forms designer that enables anyone to build sophisticated applications, and the ability to take our processes wherever you are with Nintex Mobile and Nintex Mobile Enterprise. And through the advanced connectivity, which we didn't see today of the Nintex connectors, you can integrate with other systems like Dynamics CRM or Salesforce. Finally, we also now have draw loop, providing the ability to have dynamic document generation from content and data across the enterprise. Imagine the scenarios when draw loop actions are available to create those status reports directly from within Office 365 and to spit those out as Word, PowerPoint or Excel documents to distribute to your stakeholders. So to learn more about any of the items you've seen today, or to get a free trial, please head over to www.nintex.com and choose to request a demo or to download a free 30-day trial of our on-premises products or our Office 365 products. Once again, that URL is www.nintex.com. support.nintex.com. Finally, I'd like to thank you for your time today. I hope you found this session useful and now have a greater insight in how you can leverage the Nintex products to achieve project management nirvana. With that, I hope you have a great remainder of your project virtual conference. Thank you very much.